Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Reality, Part 2, The Task of Seeing, Chapter 14. September 28th, 1969. There was something eerie about Don Juan's house. For a moment I thought he was hiding somewhere around the place to scare me. I called out to him and then gathered enough nerve to walk inside. Don Juan was not there. I put the 2 bags of groceries I had bought on a pile of firewood and sat down to wait for him, as I had done dozens of times before. But for the first time in my years of associating with Don Juan, I was afraid to stay alone in his house. I felt the presence, as if someone invisible was there with me. I remembered then that years before I had had the same vague feeling that something unknown was prowling around me when I was alone. I jumped to my feet and ran out of the house. I had come to see Don Juan to tell him that the cumulative effect of the task of seeing was taking its toll on me. I had begun to feel uneasy, vaguely apprehensive, without any overt reason, tired without being fatigued. Then my reaction at being alone in Don Juan's house brought back the total memory of how my fear had built up in the past. The fear traced back to years before, when Don Juan had forced the very strange confrontation between a sorceress, a woman named La Catalina, and me. It began in November 23rd, 1961, when I found him in his house with a dislocated ankle. He explained that he had an enemy, a sorceress, who could turn into a blackbird, and had attempted to kill him. As soon as I can walk, I'm going to show you who the woman is, Don Juan said. You must know who she is. Why does she want to kill you? He shrugged his shoulders impatiently and refused to say anything else. I came back to see him 10 days later and found him perfectly well. He rotated his ankle to demonstrate to me that it was fine and attributed his prompt recovery to the nature of the cast he himself had made. It's good you're here, he said. Today I'm going to take you on a little journey. He then directed me to drive to a desolate area. We stopped there. Don Juan stretched his legs and made himself comfortable on the seat, as if he were going to take a nap. He told me to relax and remain very quiet. He said we had to be inconspicuous as possible until nightfall, because the late afternoon was a very dangerous time for the business we were pursuing. What kind of business are we pursuing, I asked. We are here to stake out La Catalina, he said. When it was fairly dark, we slid out of the car and walked very slowly and noiselessly into the desert chaparral. From the place where we stopped, I could distinguish the black silhouette of the hills on both sides. We were in a flat, fairly wide canyon. Don Juan gave me detailed instructions on how to stay merged with the chaparral and taught me a way to sit in vigil, as he called it. He told me to tuck my right leg under my left thigh and keep my left leg in a squat position. He explained that the tucked leg was used as a spring in order to stand up with great speed if it was necessary. He then told me to sit facing the west, because that was the direction of the woman's house. He sat next to me to my right and told me in a whisper to keep my eyes focused on the ground, searching, or rather waiting, for a short wind wave that would make a ripple in the bushes. Whenever that ripple touched the bushes on which I had focused my gaze, I was supposed to look up and see the sorceress in all her magnificent evil splendor. Don Juan actually used those words. When I asked him to explain what he meant, he said that if I detected a ripple, I simply had to look up and see for myself, because a sorcerer in flight was such a unique sight that it defied explanations. There was a fairly steady wind, and I thought I detected a ripple in the bushes many times. I looked up each time, prepared to have a transcendental experience, but I did not see anything. Every time the wind blew, the bushes Don Juan would blew the bushes, Don Juan would kick the ground vigorously, whirling around, moving his arms as if they were whips. The strength of his movements was extraordinary. After a few failures to see the sorceress in flight, I was sure I was not going to witness any transcendental event. Yet Don Juan's display of power was so exquisite that I did not mind spending the night there. At daybreak, Don Juan sat down by me. He seemed to be totally exhausted. He could hardly move. He lay down on his back and mumbled that he had failed to pierce the woman. I was very intrigued by that statement. He repeated it several times, and each time his tone became more downhearted, more desperate. I began to experience an unusual anxiety. I found it very easy to project my feelings into Don Juan's mood. Don Juan did not mention anything about the incident for the woman for several months. I thought he had either forgotten or resolved the whole affair. One day, however, I found him in a very agitated mood, in a manner that was completely incongruous with his natural calmness. He told me that the blackbird had stood in front of him the night before, almost touching him, and that he had not even awakened. The woman's artfulness was so great that he had not felt her presence at all. He said his good fortune was to wake up in the nick of time to stage a horrendous fight for his life. Don Juan's tone of voice was moving, almost pathetic. I felt an overwhelming surge of compassion and concern. In a sober and dramatic tone, he reaffirmed that he had no way to stop her, and that the next time she came near him, it was going to be his last day on earth. I became despondent and was nearly in tears. Don Juan seemed to notice my profound concern and laughed. I thought bravely. He noticed my profound concern and laughed. I thought bravely. He patted me on the back and said that I should not worry. He was not altogether lost yet, because he had one last card, a trump card. Oh, wow. Recognize that word. A warrior lives strategically, he said, smiling. A warrior never carries his loads he cannot handle. Don Juan's smile had the power to dispel the ominous clouds of doom. I suddenly felt elated, and we both laughed. He patted my head. You know, of all the things on this earth, you are my last card, he said abruptly, looking straight into my eyes. What? Are you my trump card in my fight against that witch? I did not understand what he meant, and he explained that the woman did not know me, and that if I played my hand as he would direct me, I had a better than good chance to pierce her. What do you mean by pierce her? You cannot kill her, but you must pierce her like a balloon. If you do that, she'll leave me alone. But don't think about it now. I'll tell you what to do when the time comes. Months went by. I had forgotten the incident and was caught by surprise when I arrived at his house one day. Don Juan came out running and did not let me get out of my car. You must leave immediately, he whispered with appalling urgency. Listen carefully. Buy a shotgun or get one in any way you can. Don't bring me your own gun. Do you understand? Get any gun except your own and bring it here right away. Why do you want a shotgun? Go now. I returned with a shotgun. I had not had enough money to buy one, but a friend of mine had given me his old gun. Don Juan did not look at it. He explained, laughing, that he had been abrupt with me because the blackbird was on the roof of the house and did not want her to see me. Finding the blackbird on the roof gave me the idea that you could bring a gun and pierce her with it, Don Juan said emphatically. I don't want anything to happen to you, so I suggested that you buy the gun or that you get one in any other way. You see, you have to destroy the gun after completing the task. What kind of task are you talking about? You must attempt to pierce the woman with your shotgun. He made me clean the gun by rubbing it with fresh leaves and stems of a particular scented plant. He himself rubbed 2 shells and placed them inside the barrels. Then he said I was to hide in front of his house and wait until the blackbird landed on the roof, and then after taking careful aim, I was supposed to let go with both barrels. The effect of the surprise more than the pellets would pierce the woman, and if I were powerful and determined, I could force her to leave him alone. Thus my aim had to be impeccable, and so did my determination to pierce her. You must scream at the moment you shoot, he said. It must be a potent and piercing yell. He then piled bundles of bamboo and fire sticks about 10 feet away from the ramada of his house. He made me lean against the piles. The position was quite comfortable. I was sort of half-seated, my back was well propped, and I had a good view of the roof. He said it was too early for the witch to be out, and that we had to wait until dark to do all the preparations. He would then pretend he was locking himself inside the house in order to attract her and elicit another attack on his person. He told me to relax and find a comfortable position that I could shoot from without moving. He made me aim at the roof a couple of times and concluded that the act of lifting the gun to my shoulder and taking aim was too slow and cumbersome. He then built a prop for the gun. He made 2 deep holes with a pointed iron bar, planted 2 forked sticks in them, and tied a long pole in between the forks. The structure gave me a shooting support and allowed me to keep the gun aimed at the roof. Don Juan looked at the sky and said it was time for him to go into the house. He got up and calmly went inside, giving me the final admonition that my endeavor was not a joke and that I had to hit the bird with the first shot. After Don Juan left, I had a few more minutes of twilight, and then it became quite dark. It seemed as if the darkness had been waiting until I was alone, and suddenly it descended on me. I tried to focus my eyes on the roof, which was silhouetted against the sky. For a while there was enough light on the horizon so the line of the roof was still visible, but then the sky became black and I could hardly see the house. I kept my eyes focused on the roof for hours without noticing anything at all. I saw a couple of owls flying by toward the north. The span of their wings was quite remarkable, and they could not be mistaken for blackbirds. At any given moment, however, I distinctly noticed the black shape of a small bird landing on the roof. It was definitely a bird. My heart began pounding hard. I felt the buzzing in my ears. I aimed in the dark and pulled both triggers. There was quite a loud explosion. I felt the strong recoil of the gun butt on my shoulder, and at the same time I heard a most piercing and horrendous human shriek. It was loud and eerie and seemed to have come from the roof. I had a moment of total confusion. I then remembered that Don Juan had admonished me to yell as I shot, and I had forgotten to do so. I was thinking of reloading the gun when Don Juan opened the door and came out running. He had his kerosene lantern with him. He appeared to be quite nervous. "I think you got her," he said. "We must find the dead bird now." He brought a ladder and made me climb up and look on the ramada, but I could not find anything there. He climbed up and looked for himself for a while, with equal negative results. "Perhaps we have blasted the bird to bits," Don Juan said, "in which case we must find at least a feather." We began looking around the ramada first, and then around the house. We looked with the light of the lantern until morning. Then we started looking again all over the area we had covered during the night. Around 11 a.m., Don Juan called off our search. He sat down, dejected, smiled sheepishly at me, and said that if I had failed to stop his enemy, and that now, more than ever before, his life was not worth a hoot, because the woman was doubtlessly irked, itching to take revenge. "You're safe, though," Don Juan said reassuringly. "The woman doesn't know you." As I was walking to my car to return home, I asked him if I had to destroy the shotgun. He said the gun had done nothing, and I should give it back to the owner. I noticed a profound look of despair in Don Juan's eyes. I felt so moved that I was about to weep. "What can I do to help you?" I asked. "There's nothing you can do," Don Juan said. He remained silent for a moment. I wanted to leave right away. I felt an oppressive anguish. I was ill at ease. "Would you really try to help me?" Don Juan asked in a childlike tone. I told him again that my total person was at his disposal, that my affection for him was so profound I would undertake any kind of action to help him. Don Juan smiled and asked me again if I really meant that, and I vehemently reaffirmed my desire to help him. "If you really mean it," he said, "I may have one more chance." He seemed to be delighted. He smiled broadly and clapped his hands several more times, the way he always does when he wants to express a feeling of pleasure. This change of mood was so remarkable that it also involved me. I suddenly felt that the oppressive mood and the anguish had been vanquished, and life was inexplicably exciting again. Don Juan sat down, and I did likewise. He looked at me for a moment and then proceeded to tell me in a very calm and deliberate manner that I was in fact the only person who could help him at that moment, and thus he was going to ask me to do something very dangerous and very special. He paused for a moment as if he wanted reaffirmation on my part, and I again reiterated my firm desire to do anything for him. "I'm going to give you a weapon to pierce her," he said. He took a long object from his pouch and handed it to me. I took it and then examined it. I almost dropped it. "It's a wild boar," he went on. "You must pierce her with it." The object I was holding was a dry foreleg of a wild boar. The skin was ugly, and the bristles were revolting to the touch. The hoof was intact, and its two halves were spread out, as if the leg were stretched. It was an awful-looking thing. It made me feel almost sick to my stomach. He quickly took it back. "You must ram the wild boar right into her navel," Don Juan said. "What?" I said in a feeble voice. "You must hold the wild boar in your left hand and stab her with it. She is a sorceress, and the wild boar will enter her belly, and no one in this world except another sorcerer will be able to stick it in there. This is not an ordinary battle, but an affair of sorcerers. The danger you will run is that if you fail to pierce her, she might strike you dead or knife you. You may, on the other hand, get out without a scratch. If you succeed, she will have a hellish time with the wild boar in her body, and she will leave me alone." An oppressive anguish enveloped me. I had profound affection for Don Juan. I admired him. At the time of this startling request, I had learned to regard his way of life and his knowledge as a paramount accomplishment. How could anyone let a man like that die? And yet how could anyone deliberately risk his life? I became so immersed with my deliberations, I did not notice that Don Juan had stood up and was standing by me until he patted me on the shoulder. I looked up. He was smiling benevolently. "Whenever you feel that you really want to help me, you should return," he said. "But not until then. If you come back, I know that you know what you will have to do. Go now. If you don't want to return, I'll understand that too." I automatically stood up, got in my car, and drove away. Don Juan actually let me off the hook. I could have left and never have returned, but somehow the thought of being free to leave did not soothe me. I drove for a while longer, and then impulsively turned around and drove back to Don Juan's house. He was still sitting underneath the ramada and did not seem to be surprised to see me. "Sit down," he said. "The clouds in the west are beautiful. It will be dark shortly. Sit quietly and let the twilight fill you. Do whatever you want now. But when I tell you, look straight at those shiny clouds and ask the twilight to give you power and calmness. calmness. I sat facing the western clouds for a couple of hours. Don Juan went into the house and stayed inside. Then it was getting dark when he returned. "The twilight has come," he said. "Stand up. Don't close your eyes, but look straight at the clouds. Put your arms up with your hands open and let your fingers extended, and trot in place." I followed his instructions. I lifted my arms over my head and began trotting. Don Juan came to my side and corrected my movements. He placed the leg of the wild boar against the palm of my hand and made me hold it with my thumb. He then pulled my arms downward until they pointed to the orange and dark gray clouds over the horizon toward the west. He extended my fingers like fans and told me not to curl them over the palms of my hands. It was of crucial importance that I keep my fingers spread, because if I closed them, I would not be asking the twilight for power and calm, but would be menacing it. He also corrected my trotting. He said that it should be peaceful and uniform, as if I were actually running toward the twilight with my extended arms. I could not fall asleep during the night. It was as if instead of calming me, the twilight had agitated me into a frenzy. "I still have so many things pending in my life," I said, "so many things unresolved." Don Juan chuckled softly. "Nothing is pending in this world," he said. "Nothing is finished, yet nothing is unresolved. Go to sleep." Don Juan's words were strangely soothing. Around 10 o'clock the next morning, Don Juan gave me something to eat, and then we were on our way. He whispered that we were going to approach the woman around noon, or before noon if possible, and he said that the ideal time would have been the early hours of the day, because a witch is always less powerful or less aware in the morning, but she would never leave the protection of her house at those hours. I did not ask any questions. He directed me to the highway, and at a certain point he told me to stop and park on the side of the road. He said we had to wait there. I looked at my watch. It was 5 minutes to 11. I yawned repeatedly. I was actually sleepy. My mind wandered around aimlessly. Suddenly, Don Juan straightened up and nudged me. I jumped to my feet. "There she is," he said. I saw a woman walking toward the highway on the edge of a cultivated field. She was carrying a basket looped in her right arm. It was not until then I noticed that we were parked near a crossroad. There were two narrow trails that ran parallel to both sides of the highway, and another wider, more traffic trail that ran perpendicular to the highway. Obviously, people who used the trail had to walk across the paved road. When the woman was still on the dirt road, Don Juan told me to get out of the car. "Do it now," he said firmly. I obeyed him. The woman was almost on the highway. I ran and overtook her. I was so close to her that I felt her clothes on my face. I took the wild boar hoof from under my shirt and thrust it at her. I did not feel any resistance to the blunt object in my hand. I saw a fleeting shadow in front of me like a drape. My head turned to my right, and I saw the woman standing 50 feet away on the opposite side of the road. She was a fairly young, dark woman with a strong, stocky body. She was smiling at me. Her teeth were white and big, and her smile was placid. She had closed her eyes halfway, as if to protect them from the wind. She was still holding her basket, looped over her right arm. I then had a moment of unique confusion. I turned around to look at Don Juan. He was making frantic gestures to call me back. I ran back. There were 3 or 4 men coming in a hurry toward me. I got into the car and sped away in the opposite direction. I tried to ask Don Juan what had happened, but I could not talk. My ears were bursting with an overwhelming pressure. I felt that I was choking. He seemed to be pleased and began to laugh. It was as if my failure did not concern him. I had my hands so tight around the steering wheel that I could not move them. They were frozen. My arms were rigid, and so were my legs. In fact, I could not take my foot off the gas pedal. Don Juan patted me on the back and told me to relax. Little by little, the pressure in my ears diminished. "What happened back there?" I finally asked. He giggled like a child without answering. Then he asked me if I had noticed the way the woman got out of the way. He praised her excellent speed. Don Juan's talk seemed to be so incongruous that I could not really follow him. He praised the woman. He said her power was impeccable, and she was a relentless enemy. I asked Don Juan if he did not mind my failure. I was truly surprised and annoyed at his change of mood. He seemed to be actually glad. He told me to stop. I parked alongside the road. He put his hand on my shoulder and looked piercingly into my eyes. "Whatever I have done to you today was a trick," he said bluntly. "The rule is that a man of knowledge has to trap his apprentice. Today I have trapped you, and I have tricked you into learning." I was dumbfounded. I could not arrange my thoughts. Don Juan explained that the whole involvement with the woman was a trap, and that she had never been a threat to him, and that his job was to put me in touch with her under specific conditions of abandon and power I had experienced when I tried to pierce her. He commended my resolution and called it an act of power, which demonstrated to the woman that I was capable of great exertion. Don Juan said that even though I was not aware of it, all I did was to show off in front of her. "You could never touch her," he said, "but you showed your claws to her, and she knows now that you're not afraid. You have challenged her. I used her to trick you because she's powerful and relentless and never forgets. Men are usually too busy to be relentless enemies." I felt a terrible anger. I told him that one should not play with a person's innermost feelings and loyalties. Don Juan laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks, and I hated him. I had an overwhelming desire to punch him and leave. There was, however, such a strange rhythm in his laughter that it kept me almost paralyzed. "Don't be so angry," Don Juan said soothingly. Then he said that his acts had never been a farce, that he had also thrown his life away a long time before when his own benefactor tricked him, just as he had tricked me. Don Juan said that his benefactor was a cruel man who did not think about him the way he, Don Juan, thought about me. He added very sternly that the woman had tested her strength against him and had really tried to kill him. "Now she knows that I was playing with her," he said, laughing. "She will hate you for it, but she can't do anything to me. But she will take it out on you. She doesn't yet know how much power you have. She will come to test you little by little. Now you have no choice but to learn in order to defend yourself, or you will fall prey to that lady. She is no trick." Don Juan reminded me of the way she had flown away. "Don't be angry," he said. "It was not an ordinary trick. It was the rule." There was something about the way the woman moved away from me that was truly maddening. I had witnessed it myself. She had jumped the width of the highway in a flick of an eyelash. I had no way to get out of that. Certainty. For the moment I had focused on all my attention on that incident, and little by little I accumulated proof that she was actually following me. The final outcome was that I had to withdraw from the apprenticeship under the pressure of my irrational fear. I came back to Don Juan's house hours later, in the early afternoon. He was apparently waiting for me. He came up to me as I got out of my car and examined me with curious eyes, walking around me a couple of times. "Why the nervousness?" he asked before I had time to say anything. I explained that something had scared me off that morning and that I had begun to feel something prowling around me, as in the past. Don Juan sat down and seemed to be engulfed in my thoughts. His face had an unusually serious expression. He seemed to be tired. I sat by him and arranged my notes. After a very long pause, his face brightened up, and he smiled. What did you do this morning? What you felt this morning was the spirit of the water hole, he said. I have told you that you must be prepared for unexpected encounters with those forces. I thought you understood. I did not answer. I did. Then why the fear? That spirit is on your trail, he said. It already trapped you in the water. I assure you that it will tap you again, and probably you won't be prepared, and that encounter will be your end. Don Juan's words made me feel genuinely concerned. My feelings were strange, however. I was concerned, but not afraid. Whatever was happening to me I had not been able to elicit my old feelings of blind fear. What should I do? I asked. You forget too easily, he said. The path of knowledge is a forced one. In order to learn, we must be spurred. In the path of knowledge, we are always fighting something, avoiding something, prepared for something. And that something is always inexplicable, greater, more powerful than us. The inexplicable forces will come to you. And now it is the spirit of the watering hole. Later on, it will be your ally. So there is nothing you can do now to prepare yourself for the struggle. Years ago, La Catalina spurred you. She was only a sorceress, though, and that was a beginner's trick. The world is indeed full of frightening things, and we are helpless creatures surrounded by forces that are inexplicable and unbending. The average man in ignorance believes that those forces can be explained or changed. He doesn't really know how to do that, but he expects that the actions of mankind will explain them or change them sooner or later. The sorcerer, on the other hand, does not think of explaining or changing them. Instead, he learns to use such forces by redirecting himself and adapting to their direction. This is his trick. There is very little sorcery once you find out his trick. A sorcerer is only slightly better off than the average man. Sorcery does not help him to live a better life. In fact, I should say that sorcery hinders him. It makes him feel cumbersome, precarious. By opening himself up to knowledge, a sorcerer becomes more vulnerable than the average man. On the one hand, his fellow men hate him and fear him, and will strive to end his life. And on the other hand, the inexplicable and unbending forces that surround every one of us, by right of our being alive, are for a sorcerer a source of even greater danger. To be pierced by a fellow man is indeed painful, but nothing in comparison to being touched by an ally. A sorcerer, by opening himself to knowledge, falls prey to such forces, and has only one means of balancing himself: his will. Thus, he must feel and act like a warrior. I will repeat this once more. Only as a warrior can one survive the path of knowledge. What helps a sorcerer to live a better life is the strength of being a warrior. It is my commitment to teach you to see, not because I personally want to do so, but because you were chosen. You were pointed out to me by Mescalito. I am compelled by my personal desire, however, to teach you to feel and act like a warrior. I personally believe that to be a warrior is more suitable than anything else. Therefore, I have endeavored to show you those forces as a sorcerer perceives them, because only under their terrifying impact can one become a warrior. To see without first being a warrior would make you weak. It would give you a false sense of meekness, a desire to retreat. Your body would decay because you would become indifferent. It is my personal commitment to make you a warrior so you won't crumble. I have heard you say time and time again that you were always prepared to die. I don't regard that feeling as necessary. I think it is a useless indulgence. A warrior should not be prepared only to battle. A warrior should be prepared only to battle. I have also heard you say that your parents injured your spirit. I think the spirit of man is something that can be injured very easily, although not by the same acts you yourself call injurious. I believe that your parents did injure you by making you indulgent and soft and given to dwelling. The spirit of a warrior is not geared to indulging and complaining, nor is it geared to whining or losing. The spirit of a warrior is geared only to struggle, and every struggle is a warrior's last battle on earth. Thus, the outcome matters very little to him. In his last battle on earth, a warrior lets his spirit flow free and clear, and as he wages his battle, knows that his will is impeccable. A warrior laughs and laughs. I finished writing and looked up, Don Juan staring at me. He shook his head from side to side and smiled. "You really write everything?" he asked with an incredulous tone. "Gennaro says that he can never be serious with you because you are always writing. He's right. How can anyone be serious if you're always writing?" He chuckled and I tried to defend my position. "It doesn't matter," he said. "If you ever learn to see, I suppose you must do it in your own weird way." He stood up and looked at the sky. It was around noon. He said there was still time to start on a hunting trip to a place in the mountains. "Where are we going hunting?" I asked. "What are we going to hunt?" I asked. "A special animal, either a deer or a wild boar, or even a mountain lion." He paused for a moment and then added, "Even an eagle." I stood up and followed him to my car. He said that this time we were going only to observe and to find out what animal we had to hunt. He was about to get in my car when he seemed to remember something. He smiled and said that the journey had to be postponed until I had learned something without which our hunting would be impossible. He went back and sat down again underneath his ramada. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but he did not give me time to say anything before he spoke again. This brings us to the last point you must know about a warrior. A warrior selects the items that make his world. The other day when you saw the ally, I had to wash you twice. Do you know what was wrong with you? No. You had lost your shields. What shields? What are you talking about? I said that a warrior selects the items that makes his world. He selects deliberately. For every item he chooses is a shield that protects him from the onslaughts of the forces he is striving to use. A warrior would use his shields to protect himself from his ally, for instance. An average man who is equally surrounded by those inexplicable forces is oblivious to them because he has other kinds of special shields to protect him. He paused and looked at me with a questioning in his eyes. I had not understood what he meant. "What are those shields?" I insisted. "What people do," he repeated. "What do they do?" "Well, look around. People are always busy doing what people do. Those are their shields. Whenever a sorcerer has an encounter with any of those inexplicable and unbending forces we have talked about, his gap opens, making him more susceptible to his death than he ordinarily is. I've told you that we die through the gap. Therefore, if it is open, one should have his will ready to fill it. That is, if one is a warrior. If one is not a warrior, like yourself, then one has no other recourse but to use the activities of daily life to take one's mind from the fright of the encounter and thus to allow one's gap to close. You got angry with me that day when you met the ally. I made you angry when I stopped your car, and I made you cold when I dumped you out, when I dumped you into the water. Having your clothes on made you even colder. Being angry and cold helped you close your gap, and you were protected. At this time in your life, however, you can no longer use those shields as effectively as an average man. You know too much and those forces and about those forces, and now are finally at the brink of feeling and acting as a warrior. Your old shields are no longer safe. What am I supposed to do? Act like a warrior and select items of your world. You cannot surround yourself with things helter-skelter anymore. I tell you this in a most serious vein. Now, for the first time, you are not safe in your old way of life. What do you mean by selecting items of my world? A warrior encounters those inexplicable and unbending forces because he is deliberately seeking them. Thus, he is always prepared for the encounter. You, on the other hand, are never prepared for it. In fact, those forces come to you. In fact, if those forces come to you, they will take you by surprise. The fright will open your gap, and your life will irresistibly escape through it. The first thing you must do, then, is to be prepared. Think that the ally is going to pop in front of your eyes any minute, and you must be ready for him. To meet an ally is no party, no Sunday picnic, and a warrior takes the responsibility of protecting himself. And if any of those forces tap you and open your gap, you must deliberately strive to close it by yourself. For that purpose, you must have a selected number of things that give you great peace and pleasure, things which you can deliberately use to take your thoughts from your fright and close your gap and make you solid. What kind of things? Years ago, I told you that in his day-to-day life, a warrior chooses to follow the path with a heart. It is the constant choice of the path with the heart that makes a warrior different from average men. He chooses a path that has heart when he is one with it, when he experiences a great peace and pleasure traversing its length. The thing a warrior selects to make his shields are the items of a path with heart. But you said I am not a warrior, so how can I choose a path with heart? This is your turning point. Let's say that before you did not really need to live like a warrior. Now it's a little different. Now you must surround yourself with the items of a path with heart. You must refuse the rest, or you will perish in the next encounter. I may add that you don't need to ask for the encounter any longer. An ally can now come to you in your sleep while you are talking to your friends or while you are writing. For years I have truly tried to live in accordance with your teachings, I said. Obviously I have not done well. How can I do better now? You think and talk too much. You must stop talking to yourself. What do you mean? You talk to yourself too much. You're not unique at that. Every one of us does that. We carry on internal talk. Think about it. Whenever you're alone, what do? I talk to myself. What do you talk to yourself about? I don't know. Anything, I suppose. I'll tell you what you talk to yourself about. We talk about our world. In fact, we maintain our world with our internal talk. How do we do that? Whenever we finish talking to ourselves, the world is always as it should be. We renew it. We rekindle it with life. We uphold it with our internal talk. Not only that, but we also choose our paths as we talk to ourselves. Thus we repeat the same choices over and over until the day we die, because we keep on repeating the same internal talk over and over until the day we die. A warrior is aware of this and strives to stop his talking. This is the last point you have to know if you want to live like a warrior. How can I stop talking to myself? First of all, you must use your ears to take some of the burden off your eyes. We have been using our eyes to judge the world since the time we were born. We talk to others and to ourselves mainly about what we see. A warrior is aware of that and listens to the world. He listens to the sounds around him. I put my notes away. Don Juan laughed and said he did not mean I should force the issue, that listening to the sounds of the world had to be done harmoniously and with great patience. A warrior is aware that the world will change as soon as he stops talking to himself, he said, and he must be prepared for that monumental jolt. What do you mean, Don Juan? The world is such and so, only because we tell ourselves that that is the way it is. If we stop telling ourselves that the world is so-and-so, the world will stop being so-and-so. At this moment, I don't think you're ready for such a momentous blow. Therefore, you must start slowly to undo your world. I really do not understand. Your problem is that you confuse the world with what people do. Again, you're not unique in that. Every one of us does that. The things people do are the shields against the forces that surround us. What we do as people gives us comfort and makes us feel safe. What people do is rightfully very important, but only as a shield. We never learn that the things we do as people are only shields, and we let them dominate and topple our lives. In fact, I could say that for mankind, what people do is greater and more important than the world itself. What do you call the world? The world is all that is encased here, he said, and stomped the ground. Life, death, people, the allies, everything else that surrounds us. The world is incomprehensible. We won't ever understand it. We won't ever understand unravel its secrets. Thus, we must treat it as if it is a sheer mystery. An average man doesn't do this, though. The world is never a mystery to him. And when he arrives at old age, he is convinced he has nothing more to live for. An old man has not exhausted the world. He has exhausted only what people do. But in his stupid confusion, he believes that the world has no more mysteries for him. What a wretched price to pay for our shields. A warrior is aware that his confusion and learns to treat things properly. The things that people do cannot under any conditions be more important than the world. And thus a warrior treats the world as an endless mystery and what people do as an endless folly. End of chapter.